Hello, and welcome to Fearless Authenticity. This is my podcast about finding the success in life in the gifts of who we truly are. Now, these are conversations with people who know what that looks and feels like and the journey to get there. My hope is that this will be an inspiration for you, for me, and for anybody who wants to use their unique gifts to pursue their passions, make their dreams come true, and engage with the world in the way we were created to serve. As I always say, I hope this gets deep because that's where we find the good stuff. The really good, deep things are there. But it's also about the fun of life, because if it ain't fun, it ain't worth doing. So let's dare to be brave, be free, be you together. Now, my guest today is somebody very special to me. She is a genealogist, a host, speaker, photographer, consultant, documentarian. She is an expert in researching the enslaved and their communities, especially in the Mississippi Delta. She and her work have been featured in National Geographic, Time, USA Today, the New York Times, and on network television on Today, Good Morning America, CNN, MSNBC, as well as on an Emmy-winning episode of the series Who Do You Think You Are? She hosts the Black ProGen Live web show on genealogy for people of color. She also coaches family historians in her Patreon community. She is a citizen of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma, a member of two lineage societies, Sons and Daughters of the Middle Passage, National Societies of the Daughters of the American Revolution. Yes, you heard that right. She is also a past member of the California Genealogical Society and honorary life member of the African American Genealogical Society of Northern California. She is a proud wife and mother, a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. She is also my cousin and the family historian and lead researcher for the Atlas family of Lake Providence, East Carroll Parish, Louisiana. I am honored and happy to welcome my girl, my cousin, Nicka Sewell-Smith, to the Fearless Authenticity Podcast. Hey, cousin.
Hey, fool. Look at Ethel May Baby. Look at her. Look at her. Look at Ethel May Baby and Barbara Baby, girl. We here.
I'm doing it, girl. Making them proud. Making them proud. Ethel May and Barbara Jean's churn.
They churn. Listen, Annie, and Joe babies. We up here, listen, up here on the computer, doing the thing. That's exactly. Look at them on the computer. Look at them on the computer. I can hear them.
That's exactly how they would do it. My love, I am so glad that you agreed to do this. I want to start with your dedication to storytelling, specifically the storytelling of histories of families, including starting with our own, and how that went from a hobby that became a service into a career, or maybe what I would say is a vocation and a calling. How do you see that work, those histories, especially for those of us who come from enslaved ancestry? How do you see that as a pathway to define, learn about ourselves, and become who we're meant to be?
The thing that I find so interesting about that question is that those of us that are into this, right? Like I really, truly, honestly feel like it's a purpose, because not everybody can handle the information that we come across. Not everybody is able to process it appropriately. Sometimes you have to take a step back. Sometimes you have to cuss. I cussed yesterday because it's something that I encounter. And for me, my personal journey with family history research, it's what has edified me and kept me in working in this in terms of it being a professional field. Yes, I make money, but I'm not here for that. I am here for the cultural enrichment. I'm here to help build people up. I'm here to reestablish identity, to help inform folks about where they truly come from and whom they truly come from. And so I just use my personal walk and what I've learned and gleaned from maintaining our own family project. You know, I always shout you all out in everything that I do, because that's where I cut my teeth. That's why I learned and failed and was successful. And most of what I do today, I owe it to having my first clients, which were you all. Really, honestly and truly, y'all were my first clients. You told me when it sucked. You told me when it didn't. Matter of fact, I'll never forget the first time I called myself doing a little book. And, you know, I'm calling it what everybody else is calling it. You know, everyone's talking about it's a souvenir book. And I distinctly remember somebody with the initials JMS telling me that it was not a souvenir book, that it was an actual book, and that I needed to treat it as such. And when I give talks and when I coach people on how to put their family history together, I oftentimes refer back to that note that you gave me, where I could have taken that personally and said, oh, she just, but it wouldn't look like it looks now had I not taken the note and had I not addressed a need that my first customer gave me or told me that I needed to fill. So again, the Atlas family is honey, is trial by fire sometimes. Sometimes.
Well, it's not like you didn't have the most difficult family to be a client, because we come with demands.
We come with demands and we have expectations. And that's not to say that you can't fail or that you don't have any space to grow or that people are super critical, but we also expect what we know that you can do, right? As opposed to having over just, like overarching expectations that people just can never attain. So, so again, it was, I can't even explain how much of a great training ground it was to be a part of our family. And now, matter of fact, that book is right here. People see it all the time. They're like, oh my gosh, this is your family. And I'm like, once you gave me that feedback, that really sort of empowered me, that said, it doesn't have to stay on this page and be stale. It doesn't have to look like just a regular black and white textbook. You can make this whatever you want to make it. And I was like, man, forget this. Like, and in some ways I kind of approach what I do from that vein, is that it doesn't have to look like what everybody else is doing. I can find inspiration and I can find anything, a quote, a photo, a color, the way someone says something. Any of those things can spark my curiosity and can spark my interest and can drive what I do in my work with genealogy and family history. And it doesn't have to look the same way that everybody thinks it does.
It really doesn't. I mean, and because one of the things was that I remember saying and you know what, here's the crazy part. I didn't even think about it as giving you a note as much as like, this is just what I want to see, and I remember thinking, and it's also what I saw in it, right? Because as a lifelong storyteller from families, both sides, but Atlas included, where storytelling around the Thanksgiving table, with storytelling and talking, smack about each other across the country, because our family, that is, the Atlas family is spread far and wide.
Right.
And so the way we all know about each other prior to technology being what it is, was in the telling of those stories and keeping things alive, and maybe messing people's names up, me and Maple Leaf.
Right. Or Chung Jing, that didn't actually get his name called. He was just, hey, you, hand me that.
Right. But what's that child's name again?
Right. What is his name? And then we made it his mama name, which it had nothing to do with his mama. Right. It was right. Yeah.
And so and the thing is that happens, even past in generations. It's like, but I remember seeing that and looking at all the lists of names and years and little stories that were in there, was how all those things were connected to each other and how that defines who we are. Now, one of the things I want to talk to you about, because this is something you and I have talked about just personally, is how you have come to use all of your skills now that you studied and developed in college that you didn't feel like you were using in your prior career. I want to talk about how you transitioned into the work you were doing before genealogy into how you are now. Like, was that a career that you felt like you should be doing, that you felt you were encouraged to do? And when did you realize that it wasn't in alignment with what you were put on this earth to do?
Well, I mean, the short answer is no. And again, it was great, paid the bills, was working in healthcare, but now I truly see it as sort of the runway, right? You don't get on a plane at the gate and they load you and they hand you your little stuff, and you don't just take off right from the gate, right? Like, there's a runway, you have to taxi. And so that previous job and things, that was my taxi experience, right? Before my plane actually took off. And it enabled me to kind of hone more of my research skills. I think that's what makes me so persistent in research is, I was doing basically genealogy on a doctor's work history, where I was having to validate if they worked at this hospital from these dates to these dates. How was their conduct? How was their professionalism? Did they kill anybody? All those kinds of things I was having to validate in order for them to get privileges at the hospitals that were a part of our healthcare system. And so again, they had to account for every month with the exception of like a 3-month time gap. That's genealogy. You're trying to pinpoint where people are at a specific time, who they're involved with, all that. It's the exact same thing. And so as I was working that job, I always remind people we were in a economic downturn in the year 2001 before September 11th happened. And I love to remind people of this because I graduated from college that same year. And so, I was living in the Bay Area in California, San Francisco, Oakland. And, some of my friends were getting these jobs at tech companies where they were making $70,000, $80,000 a year straight out of school. It reminds me of the Simpsons episode where Bart got a job at a .com and he was wiping his butt with dollars. And so, right, it was kind of that was the world. And so, I was hoping to land something, and it just was like a went, like, no. And then, within 4 months of graduation, we have September 11th. And then, the markets and everything just went completely down. And so I had to take what I could get. But at the time, I continued to hone and build my skills as a researcher, not so much as an ends to justify the means or as a way to make money, but just because I had an interest in it. And it was something that just drove me. And anything that I thought about wanting to do professionally, I would try it out on our family project, whether it was blogging, whether it was, literally I made a movie, not knowing how to make a movie. I made a movie. That's nuts thinking about it. Cause now that I'm sort of involved with stuff like that, now I'm like, how did I even think? But that's the power of a creative mind, and a mind that is not stopped by resources or that again, is just a young mind. I guess we'll just call it a young mind. And so, I just continue to hone my skills, research skills, skills that I had developed in college, going to school for journalism, all of those things, learning how to edit video, sound, all that stuff. I would just transfer it. Like, I can do this on my family, and I didn't even think it was a thing until people would tell me, wow, you blog the whole trip. That's reporting. How is that any different from sending out a journalist or a reporter out on the field to report? Again, think about what's going on right now with the presidential election. We just had the Iowa caucuses. There are reporters from major agencies out there reporting every day on what they're seeing, who they're talking to. I was doing that for our family with our research trips. What was happening when we went to the courthouse? What happened when we went to that cemetery? What did we find in the records? What did we not find? Who did we meet? What did we see? All the imagery, it's the exact same thing. I just pimped it for genealogy.
Now, when did you see, though, that career transition as a runway? Like, did you know that that's what it was when you were doing it? When did you realize the gift of it? Because I think the reason why I ask this question is because I think for so many of us, we look at people once they've achieved something,
right?
And we think that it was all a plan, right? And I tell people that, and nobody believes me when I say, I didn't actually plan this out like this, right?
Listen, you was a psychology major. I need the people to understand. My cousin was a psychology major. She would thought the news station was fun. That was something she was doing. She didn't think that she was going to be on the radio and on television for 30-some years. She did not have this planned out. Well, hold on, let me co-opt your situation for a second.
No, you're not gonna tell my story on my podcast. Okay, go ahead.
I done rolled the sleeves up. Yes. What I need people to understand is that we do not come from a heavily arts-centric family. We do not.
Even though there are
artists, with the exception of your mama. That's what I'm saying.
Fully in our family. And even her, as a musician, was like, yeah, that's I think you need to get your teaching certificate.
Listen, you got to go to that factory, go to Campbell Soup, get that job on the line where you could retire. And those are the type of people. We come from very hardworking, sort of blue collar, agrarian, or, that next generation, which is our parents. where they left agriculture and moved into office jobs and things like that. Those are the type of people we come from. So when you talk to my mom, I just said this last week, and you ask her what me and my sister do, she'll say, Nicka searches for dead people and Nicole just dance all day. That's what she would probably say. Right? Like,
and here's the thing, it's not a lie.
That's what Jeanne talks.
Right. And she would be completely accurate in all of those things. And and this is something that I try to explain to people about family as well, is how generational wealth is not just in money, right?
Correct.
It's also in the experiences that our families have and how they pass it on. And all of those things weave together. And that was kind of what I was getting at is, a lot of times our pathways look really make a whole lot of sense once we've gotten to a certain destination.
Right.
But there's a lot of things that go into that. So I want to back up and talk about when did you realize you were on a runway, and how did you use it to get where you are? Because sometimes I think that's where we also fail, is we don't realize that where we are is getting us ready for the next thing.
Right. And to play on the airplane thing, once you're in your seatbelt, there's a whole lot of things that the flight crew is doing that you don't recognize or that you don't see. Right. Because all you are is you got your beats on, you didn't turn on your Netflix or whatever, but you don't know all the safety checks. You don't know the walk. You just see them walking through the plane. You see them servicing other people. They're in the galleys doing different things. And in our lives, depending on who you pray to or who you believe in, there's a lot of orchestration happening behind the scenes that you cannot yet see. And that is what is happening on that taxiing of the runway. And for me, I just kept sewing. That's what I kept doing, is I kept sewing into my craft. I kept sewing into our family. I kept sewing into other people that I could assist and help, whether it was through, volunteering at the Family History Center or presenting at my local society meeting or doing all that other kind of stuff. And it wasn't until I reached out to a fellow genealogist, because her mother and me shared DNA. And I recognized her username on Ancestry. And I just messaged her and I said, hey, we're both speaking at this conference. I would just love to meet you because we're cousins. And literally this video is still on YouTube. The first time we met, we talked about the whole story. And it wasn't too long until after that she introduced me and basically was like, it would be great if you came on as a consultant. I never even thought, like, me? Why would anybody want to consult with me? Like,
that's how it started? I don't know this story. I did not know this story.
You didn't know this? Oh, yeah, that's how it started. Literally how it started. It's because of Krista Cowan. No lie. It's because of Krista Cowan. And I didn't even see myself in that place. I didn't see myself as being someone who was an asset in that way. Now I completely see it. But sometimes it takes, again, you notice on the plane, sometimes it takes other people doing other things and being at the right place at the right time in order for you to be able to take off, right? Because yes, the pilot could just decide, but how do they really know what's going on until the flight crew says, we're good to go. Everybody's in their seatbelts, blah, 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 until they sit down, buckle themselves in. And not only that, but air traffic control has to tell the pilot when it's okay to take off so that they don't crash into other people. You see how there's all these other things in the wheel that are going, all these spokes that are in the wheel operating, but we're concentrated on the tire itself and not the spokes in the wheel, not all of the other stuff. Now, if there's air there's all these different things. And so literally that's how it happened, was because I don't even think I was at a place where I even had an expectation that would happen. The other thing is I had started doing Black Pro Gen Live because I saw that there was a lack of a voice there, an authentic voice. I didn't hear anybody making references to, the East Coast, West Coast beef and genealogy. And, I didn't hear people talking about stuff that I was used to, or if I could reference the Carter. and Nino Brown, and people would know what I was talking about. Everyone thought that family history and genealogy was for people who were much older, but with Black Pro-Gen, we're very clear that it's multi-generational, and that it's not all young and it's not all old, but that being a Gen Xer, we're the dividing line right down the middle. And so that again, just not knowing if anybody was going to watch, you know what I mean? Like I didn't have that. Oh my gosh, like I didn't care how many subscribers I had. I didn't care how many people watched. I just wanted to put the best thing out. I just wanted to put out what I did not get when I was a new genealogist. That's what I wanted to put out. That's what I wanted people to hear and see and experience. And let me tell you, some of those videos are almost 10 years old. People are still commenting. People are still writing me. People for literally for 130 episodes, people are still sending me stuff. I think the last one we did was maybe last year. We talked about the reparations movement, and it never fails. Like it's the one thing about me, I think too, that especially with folks that may want me to come on and do different things, they don't have to wonder how I'm going to show up. You already see it because it's already out there. You got 130 videos where you can see what I'm going to say.
And Lord knows you're consistent with it.
Right. I am.
So when we talk about generational things, I want to go back to that since that thread kind of popped up, and that's really the work that you do. Like one of the things that like I just mentioned about how generational wealth is more than just money. It's experience. It's, having like in my family line, I guess I should make it clear. Nicka and I are second cousins. Our mothers are first cousins. Our grandparents are siblings. And in my particular family line, I'm third generation college educated, which makes it so much more like I didn't realize the advantage I had going away to school, because even though I didn't have the money and I needed scholarships and loans and all that other stuff, I had somebody in my family, several somebodies in my family who had been to school, had been to not only HBCUs, which most of my aunts and uncles and my mother did, but also went to PWIs for graduate school and could say, this is what the experience is like. This is what you should expect. This is what I think you should do. You make your own choices, but here's that support that's built into it. Now, at the same time, we also have generational traumas and things like that. How do you see the stories of people changing and how their trajectories change once they know where they come from? Because I think in our family, we have always been very clear about where we come from, because Uncle John and Cousin Tim did our first, we've been having family reunions since as long as I've been alive. I think the first one might have been in 72.
Girl, no, see, when you talk about the Bayou Classic, you got to bring up the Atlas Family Reunion, which is why we had it in November to start, was because it correlated with Thanksgiving and the Bayou Classic, and the fact that the older set of cousins went to Southern and the younger set went to Grambling. So it was a natural fit.
And in my mom's generation, in the same sibling set, there were a gang that went to Southern, and the older siblings went to Southern, and the younger siblings
went to Grambling.
And so Thanksgiving was always chaos.
Right. It was chaos. Right. But that was a ubiquitous story across the family. Like, even outside of your, immediacy, even when you go out to further cousins, that was still the story. And they used to have the Bayou Classic in Northern Louisiana before they moved it to New Orleans. Oh, girl, yeah. Like that's the Bayou Classic is why we have a family reunion. Like, let me emphatically say that. That's why we have it, because we were meeting before they.
So let's pause for a second and explain to people who are not from Louisiana and don't have HBCU culture down. Bayou Classic,
and who don't have NBC Sports to see it on Saturday after Thanksgiving.
There might be some people listening who don't know, Nicka.
Right, right. So a classic, right? So we're gonna break it down. A classic. It's the same way, again, a classic song, a classic car ride is something that has a legacy and a spirit behind it. And in terms of football and historically Black colleges and universities, we have one of the most well-known long-running classics, which is the Bayou Classic, which is between the Southern University Jaguars and the Grambling University Tigers. Grambling University is in Grambling, Louisiana, Northeast Louisiana, and Southern is in Baton Rouge, which is in Southeastern Louisiana. And the two teams come together customarily the Saturday after Thanksgiving, and they have the Bayou Classic. It began in North Louisiana, and then eventually they moved it down to the Superdome in New Orleans. And so again, like
and
if
it's
you
like
go,
Black Mardi Gras.
it is like in
I'm gonna say
November.
that right now. It's
Right.
Black
There's a
Mardi
step
Gras in
show.
November.
There's a
Battle of the
step show.
Bands.
There's a battle of the bands. I would say if you want somewhat of kind of like a classic experience, look at the Act 3 of Drumline, the movie Drumline. If you
Yes.
get to act the third act of Drumline, where you see the battle of the bands, that's kind of like a classic experience of people losing their mind and the dancers and all the stuff. It's very Black.
And it is very, and it's also very Atlas, because what my memory of Bayou Classic is my mom and my oldest uncles fighting with my aunts and my younger uncles during the game, whether or not we went to New Orleans for the game, which some people would go or whatever, but it was literally a whole day of talking shit about the bands, because like my mom was a music major at Southern.
Right. But let me go back. It wasn't about the football game, because didn't I just mention football was happening? Football happens during the Bayou Classic. But there's also another game, which is the battle of the two bands. So I mentioned there's a battle of the bands. They have a battle of the bands. There's a whole thing. I mean, they got pyrotechnics and all kinds of stuff that happens before the game. Then during halftime, the bands perform again.
And that's where Drumline, that drama of Drumline comes from. So right. I just want to set that stage for everybody so they understand that there are layers to this.
Yes, there is.
But what I did not realize, see, and I'm even learning things now. I did not realize that that's how our family reunions started.
That's how the family reunion started, is because of the Bayou Classic. And to your point around inheritance, right? You know, for us great grandchildren, you know, even though in my direct line, I wasn't the third generation college graduate. In our family, technically I was, because of your mother and my mom's first cousins, and even the generation before that, where our great grandparents sent their sons to Tuskegee. People with 8th grade, 9th grade education sent their kids away to school. We had 3 uncles that went to Tuskegee. And so by the time it got down to us, it was like, it was an expectation. It was, you know, even for me, it was like, you know, I remember wanting to go to HBCU, and my mom was like, well, don't feel like you have to go because everyone else went. Like, you can go wherever you want to go. You know, don't feel like don't feel like it's a pressure that you have to go. And I was like,
interesting.
Right.
Interesting. But I remember my mother saying something similar. She was like, this was the only option we had. This was the only option I had. This was the only option my father had, because my grandfather was one of those sons that went to Tuskegee. But she was like, that was because it was the only place we could go. She was like, I would love if you went to Southern, because that's where I went. I'd prefer if you didn't go to Grambling. And I guess it's okay that you go to Northwestern, because I went there as well. But it was a thing, like, I think for her, it was like, ooh, I would prefer you to have an HBCU experience, right? Because I know you'll be safe there. I know what a PWI is, and I know what that experience is. And she was like, I know you'll be fine, but I would prefer to you to be in this cocoon. It's interesting how across family lines, the storyline is the same.
And let me also say this to you all too, is, you know, we talk about how my personal journey with genealogy really permeates into my professional one. A lot of the stuff that I draw examples from is from the experience of our family, right? Me and you did not grow up together at all, right? And there are 50 of us. There are 25 in the generation above us. Out of those 25, only one of them was not born in Northeast Louisiana. One. Think about that. And you know the one that was not born in Northeast Louisiana. And the reason why I say that is because you would think of those 25, right, that were born in Northeast Louisiana, 24, right, because there's one that was not. Oh, they all knew each other. No, they didn't, because their parents removed them through the Great Migration, which is how you have our immediate family from our great-grandparents being in Michigan, Louisiana, California, Illinois, Pennsylvania. What state? There's like 5 or 6 states just amongst our grandparents and their siblings. So my mother and your mom, they did not grow up around their first cousins. Not all of them, not in that way. So the fact that they both said the same thing,
fascinating.
that
Absolutely
is very fascinating. It makes it totally like nature versus nurture.
Right.
Sort of
Well, there's a
thing.
lot of thing about our family that's like that. I want to get back though to how you see that not only playing out in our family, but in other families that you consult with. I mean, you've done at this point in your career a lot of celebrity things, and some of the things you share with people, I see the looks on their faces when you tell them the news or when the news that you've researched is told to them, and it can be breathtaking. It can be enlightening. It can be sad because the things that you sense are true about you and about your family and where you're come from, then you have that confirmation, and it is both the good stuff that we want to carry on and the bad things that we knew we carried with us but couldn't quite put our fingers on, that generational trauma thing. So how do you see the work you do transforming people's lives in how they express themselves as themselves?
Gosh, it's a lot of confirmation. A lot of people get confirmation. Like, here I was thinking I was the odd man out, and I couldn't understand why I did this thing or why I had this interest, or, what about this place was drawing me there. And then, they start digging into their family history, or, I tell them things and they're like, wow, okay, so now I know where that comes from, and for people of color in particular, for Black folks, a lot of times when I start working with people, I give them permission to seek this information out, because a lot of us had the don't be in grown folks' business. Some of the topics were off limits, and there's a natural environment to not question and not to want to lean in and try to understand more, because a lot of this is traumatic. There's a lot going on. And just family dynamics just in general. And so it's empowering. It for some people, it completely changes the trajectory of what they choose to do and how they start to live their lives. When historical anniversaries come up, they have a frame of reference to connect back to around who in their family was alive and what they were experiencing. For me, like when Tulsa happened, we had the 100th anniversary of Tulsa Race Massacre. And that's, like, oh, the general vicinity where my grandmother was from. It was 50 miles away. She was a toddler. You can't tell me that my great-grandparents weren't affected by that. Like, you flat out can't tell me that. You know what I mean? So when that anniversary rolls around, those are the people I'm thinking about. It's the same thing with things like Hurricane Katrina, or, any of the more recent things where we don't have to go back and think of who was alive when that happened. No, you lived to see it. And when we start going through our family histories, we learn the names of the people in our families that survived some of these things or lived to see some of these things. And again, I've seen people start foundations. I've seen people choose to write and dig into who their ancestor was, who chose to reclaim their ancestors' identities. Take it back from the academy and say, actually, no, I'm the descendant. I'm the one who can say which direction this should go. You can't, just because you wrote a dissertation on it does not necessarily mean that you own this person's identity. I mean, I've seen people do some incredible things with the information that they find. And, the sky's really the limit for a lot of this, because, as I've told you, we don't know what we're going to find when we get in there. We don't know.
Right. And when you do, that empowerment can change your life, and not just professionally. Like, one thing I want to talk about is something that I really admire about you and Rashad, is how you have shaped your family in a way that isn't necessarily in alignment with the way we've been raised or the way our generations before have been raised. One thing that, and this, I don't know if you know or not, did you know that my Uncle John had a degree in music from Grambling?
I did.
Okay, so I just found that out.
He was in the Marching Tigers. Yes, he was.
I knew that. I didn't realize that was his degree, though. But yep. We had a whole conversation when I was in Vegas, the last time I was in Vegas and visited with them. And he was like, well, that wasn't really a career. And I'm thinking to myself, you and Anathalie got music degrees, and Mama and this. And I was like, why does nobody tell me these things? Because, but then I realized it makes their advice a little bit different. It makes it hit a little bit different in telling me not to do what I eventually went on and did anyway. But here's
Right.
the thing that I find is so beautiful about how you and Shad raised Chandler is that you lean into his full gifts. I mean, not knowing where they're going to go because he just turned seven? No,
9.
nine. How was that child 9? Hold up. How did I miss 2 years?
Baby,
No, my
baby,
Channy
it's
with
about
the
to be a
ashy,
decade this year. Yes, ma'am.
my baby with the ashy knees is not
Yo,
9.
listen, yo, baby singing Stevie Wonder. Yes, yes. And now we get Queen concerts in the shower. It's a whole vibe. But with the music, I think it's because we saw early
Mm-hmm.
what he was into, like, and it was just nurturing what he was into, right? And just, again, 6 months old, you play a song and he was singing it back. And we were like, who is this child? And now at 9 he plays 3 instruments.
Right.
And and it's just, and the other thing I think that also helps is we have a community of family members who like nurture that and like lean into it, so the piano that's in the other room came from a cousin who had it just sitting in a closet, and the first trumpet he had came from another cousin who had it sitting in the closet. And and a lot of it has just been, I'll mention something on social media, or I'll be in conversations with people and they'll say, oh, you know what, let's even one of our cousins in Minneapolis was like, hey, they have this great camp here during the summer, I'm going to check it out. Like it was totally a community thing in addition to like just both of us. And for me, I have to say it's a little bit of a selfish thing too, because I always wanted to play an instrument when I was a child. And I will not tell the story as to why it sort of got banished, because that involves my sister. But ask her about the accordion.
Well, here's the thing. I think that we're going to have a 3 for conversation anyway, because we're not going to get everything into this. And I am talking to Nicole, just for everybody to know, I am talking to another family member. Like, I have a feeling the podcast is going to have a whole different theme. I was telling my producer, Vicky, about other family members. She was like, there's a whole series in this. She was like, what's up with your family?
Honestly, there is. And I total sidebar, if we need to like cut this. Chris Lucas has this incredible idea now that he's retired from the Navy, that he wants to go around and visit family members and cook with them and cook a meal with them.
Oh my God.
And right. And he's like, I just want them to cook just whatever their like the recipe is that comes at the top of their head. I want them to tell me about when they first did it and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's such a cool concept. And I'm just like, really? I'm like, all you have to do is set up your phone and do whatever. But like, he's like super into that. But we have plenty of people in the family that have great stories that, right.
We need to actually have a family production company so we can just do all these things and put them out. And so none of us have to actually work for a living.
Listen and set it up, girl. Because I have fully leaned into the fact that whenever I do this civil rights thing, it's gonna have to be fictionalized, because I don't want nobody trying to kill me because I told the truth.
Well,
okay.
Well, here's the thing, though. You do have the spirit of Atlases not dying and telling when they tell the truth. You have the spirit of our ancestors living on to tell how they did things to white people that nobody else could.
I mean, that part is there too. So, yeah. But to your point around Chandler, it is again seeing and just knowing again when I was a kid how I wanted lessons, I wanted things like that. And it was so funny. We over the holiday break, he didn't have piano lessons, and so they had gone over some stuff. We hadn't really done anything. And they sat down yesterday, and Rashad like films it so that when they go back and practice, he can hit. And that little boy, he was like, "Oh," Rashad said, "I don't remember how that went." And Chandler was like,
and it went right. Something like this,
right? Like just no, completely. I totally feel like watching John Batiste, I'm seeing a grown version of my child.
Oh, I love that.
All day. That. Personality, everything.
Yeah, I love that though. But I also love how it's a conscious choice, or it seems to be a conscious choice based on what you know about our family, what you know about yourself, what you've discovered. And I can't help, and this is part of the reason, the biggest part of the reason why I wanted to talk to you on fearless authenticity, is because I feel like our history frees us up to give the world the gifts that we're supposed to give. Like, this world wouldn't be what it was if our cousins Jeanne and Alice were not, freedom riders. This world would not be what it is if our cousins, John, my uncle John and our cousin Timothy didn't start our family tree, and we know where we came from. That, I don't know, would you even be doing what you were supposed to be doing were it not for them?
I no, like it's not even a question to me. And I think that generational inheritance piece that you're talking about completely rolls there. One of the things that I've noticed in genealogy and family history is that the sooner your family acquired land after slavery ended, a lot of times dictates where you are at today. Because your concerns, some of your life concerns are not the same. It's not, if I could just get to the owning the land, if I could just get to this part or get to that part. For us, it's not that. It's, okay, we did that. Now the next goal is send your kids to college. Okay, then now the next goal is start a business. Okay, now the next goal is, and we somehow, this family from this little one horse town, you
literally.
Right, like we're literally from a one horse town, and we end up with 3 freedom riders, someone who testifies in front of the U.S. Civil Rights Commission. We have you, we have me, we have Cedric Richmond, who's an advisor to the Obama administration. We've got a colonel in the U.S. Army, retired colonel. Like, there's all these people that are all under this one building, this one house, and that's the true impact of knowing your family history, is that these younger generations can see that, yes, you may have come from the little one horse town, but we don't have a one horse town mentality, right? Like, that's the ingenuity of who we are. And again, it's the holding the world on the shoulders, and the fact that that's our name, and that it was a deliberate choice to have that name, that it wasn't something that someone gave to us, that someone had the intestinal fortitude, so to say, to choose the name. Like, how do they make people that way? Like, I often wonder how did that come to be? And I'm still getting the answers every single day. But to me, the fruit is seeing now, after more than a decade of being in relationship with branches of our family who did not grow up with the knowledge like we did, and seeing them flourish because they have the information now, and what they're able to do with it. To me, that is the grandest experiment. That's the result and the fruit that you want to get from all of this that was put out there. And there's really no other way we can go, but up.
Right. And I think so many of us, as people who have enslaved people in our ancestry, are often afraid to find out the bad stories, because nobody wants bad news. I mean, the world is bad enough as it is, right? Like, I get that approach. And I try to tell people, like, knowledge is power, and our stories are the most powerful ones we can have. And that's the gift of it, right? That's the thing that I think, if I had to share with anybody, I can pull out volume 9 of the Atlas family story and go, hey, listen, this is where we are. And even though on the Sparrow side, I know stories, I may not have that document, but I know stories. I know stories that go back generations, and I can say where I come from in a very definitive way and who I'm made of, right? And I think that is so important to being able to step forward confidently in what our purpose is. When I say the words fearless authenticity to you, how does that look to you? How does that, like, what's your reaction? What's your first thought? How do you think about it in terms of how you live your life, how you do your work?
The first thing that came to mind was Sundays on Zoom.
Because you got to be fearless okay, so I should explain to people that there is an Atlas family Zoom call every Sunday that started during the pandemic that continues to this day. That is it's a bunch of raucousness.
It's fearless authenticity. Like it literally is the example of that. Again, people not being scared to say things, people living in their authenticness to the point of maybe you might get into a debate with somebody else about your thoughts. But to me, that's such a central part of how so many of us show up in the world and why we are put in certain places is, and even, you know, for me in particular, is because I show up in a place where I'm being me, I'm living in my truth, and I'm not ashamed of it. And I'm okay with being in the room and being the lone dissenter. You know, that's a common thread throughout our family is that why are we the ones that always have to speak up? Even when we don't want to. Like you're like, okay, somebody else is gonna say something. And you sit there and you
And
wait.
you wait.
And you wait.
Is that the reason why? Is that the reason why we have the Atlas scowl?
Yes,
Because
ma'am.
okay, so here's the thing I have to share with people, and I may have to pull out some pictures as evidence. Although you have pictures in the back and behind you that probably can show them. There is a very distinct look of across that particular shared side of our family in every photo where everybody's like this.
It's the reason why I hesitantly changed your profile photo in my phone. When we got the new iPhone little, you know, like things, and I love the one like you just like she's like being her and her little poster. But her Jeanne's original profile photo was a picture of me and her both having the look on our faces at
The
a family
Atlas look.
gathering. Right. And it was so and every time you called me, I would scream every time I saw it because it just and it is that it's a displeasure. It's like, oh, again, there's so many things wrapped up into it, but it's very hard for you not to be fearless and authentic. It's uncomfortable for us. And which to me is all the more reason why you are hosting this podcast is because
And you know, and can I tell you something? It only just dawned on me that this is part of my familial contribution to who we are because it's how we were raised to be. It literally, because it's something I think we all struggle with, right, on some level. But it is also something that has been expected and required of us. And I don't know that I ever connected it until this moment. So thank you.
it is bar none. It is the whole, like, I don't know. I mean, think about it. You have 390-pound, 5'1", 5'2", 19, 18, 20, 20-year-old young ladies who are actively picketing businesses on Canal Street in New Orleans with signs saying certain things. Or my personal favorite story, when Jeanne went and integrated the zoo.
Right. And this is my mom's first cousin, Jeanne.
Right. My mom's first cousin too.
Exactly.
Right.
Our mother's first cousin, Jeanne.
Like, she went and integrated the zoo. Like
Audubon Zoo in New Orleans.
Right. Audubon, right.
She said, I want to go see the animals.
Right. On a day that is not relegated for Black people. But how fearless and authentic do you have to be to challenge the norms? Same person who was in the room when they invited Dr. King to go on the Freedom Rides, and he said he couldn't go because he had warrants. And here these 19 and 18-year-old kids are like, I got them too. What you saying?
And your point is what, sir?
And your point is what? So, again, for them to do that, to go on the Freedom Rides, you know what I mean? For my grandfather. Right, for your grandfather. And let me go ahead and say this about Uncle Joseph. Because it wasn't just that he testified in front of the U.S. Civil Rights Commission about voting rights, because that itself was dangerous. For me personally, it's the fact that he sent a notarized letter back to the Department of Justice naming every single person who tried to economically coerce him with the dates, the amount of money that lives in the congressional record. That is a level of fearless authenticity. To me, that typifies the whole point of this podcast. Is because think about it. We're doing early 60s, rural Louisiana. We're talking the KKK. We're talking white citizens councils. We're talking a sovereignty commission for the state of Louisiana. Let me game some people up, because the people know about Mississippi Sovereignty Commission, But folks don't know that the state of Louisiana had a surveillance arm that monitored people in the civil rights movement. We had our own. And do you know the head of the Sovereignty Commission was the town of New Orleans, town of Lake Providence? The lawyer.
Girl, stop. I didn't know that. The one lawyer who did everything in that town.
Right. The one who was suing. Right. He was the head of the Sovereignty Commission for the state of Louisiana. All of that was what he was up against. And yet and still you can go and just because I want it preserved in posterity and not living in some library, I've listed out all the people that would not gin his cotton, would not give oil to heat the house during the winter time.
He had to go to Tallulah. I remember that story. He had to go to Tallulah to get his cotton ginned. Yeah.
And I'm not telling this to scare people off from being fearlessly authentic. What I'm saying is that there was a price that had to be paid.
So can I tell you when I realized, can I tell you, I spent most of my life not knowing a lot. I mean, I knew FJ Atlas because in our branch, we called him FJ.
FJ, we called him Joseph.
FJ, right. Joseph. Well, Willa Mae called him Joseph. But he was the Reverend FJ Atlas Sr. Okay.
Right.
But I mean, I knew that he held elected office. I knew, he had a church. I knew he was a farmer. I knew about Grandpa Babe and his craziness. I knew all of these things, but it wasn't until he died that I read his full obituary that
Uncle John, right? Uncle John, and I say Uncle John because
he
my mama's first cousins, right? My mama's first cousins because they older. That's uncle.
Cousins are uncles. Yeah, right. Just like I'm my cousins, just like I'm Chandler's auntie.
Right, and my mama, right, same
exactly.
thing.
Exactly. She mama.
But the thing is, to your point around knowing but not, it was the same thing for me, but it was not so much from we want to protect you from it. It was almost like there's gonna come a time and a place where you're gonna learn the whole story.
Yep.
And for me, it manifested in the FBI taps your phones.
Right.
That's how it came down to me. And I was like, why is the FBI tapping? Why are they doing that? Not realizing my mama had an uncle and 3 first cousins in the civil rights movement. That's why the phones was getting tapped. That's why nobody could go back to Lake Providence for years.
That's why the lights would be off sometimes. And that's the reason why they had propane tanks on the side, because you never knew when the gas wasn't going to be working or things. And here's the thing that I remembered when I read my grandfather's obituary. And I remember because I think I was in my early 20s when Granddaddy died. And I remember reading it, but I remembered a memory of this tree in the front of the yard on Hood Lane, where that creeped me out because the girl's bedroom faced this tree and it used to cast this gnarly.
We used to sleep in there for the research trip, so I know exactly what you're
you know what I'm talking about. And that tree would cast the most sinister shadow through that, and no kind of curtains. You would have to just cover your head with one of Willa Mae's quilts, which were heavy as hell, to block it out. And I remember finding out late, and I remember that tree always creeped me out. I never went by it. I never played at it, whatever. Turns out the reason why Joseph left that tree there is because that was the tree the White Citizens Council or the KKK or whoever it was in that moment set on fire in front of the house because he was registering people to vote in 1948 or something, some other such thing. And the fact that he lived until his 90s is, again, another example of another Atlas as a Black man in East Carroll Parish surviving, speaking truth to power. We still don't know how that.
Listen, it is, and to go back to the empowering part, when I finally found who the slave owner was of our ancestors, and the fact that he was a lawyer, and the fact that he was arguing against secession, and the fact that he was arguing against movements that were anti-immigrant, and he was a slave owner, and seeing our family emerge from enslavement, and they've got the equivalent of like $5,000 with a personal estate. How? They were skilled laborers, they were carpenters, they hired themselves out. One of them was a veterinarian, basically. And then the next generation, again, is just progression. The general store, and him getting into the tiff with the two white men, and them being fined, and him not
dying.
In
a parish where people were always getting lynched. Midwives. And also talking about the strength of the women of our family.
Oh, gosh,
right?
I mean, the fact that my grandmother's birth certificate has 3 generations on it because Grandma Clora delivered her, which then makes me know that Grandma Clora delivered your grandfather too. Like, no, because that was his grandmother. Like, you've got that, the fact that, for every Grandma Susie, who, God bless her for being pregnant for like 20 years. Because God knew what he
couldn't be me.
Couldn't be me. For every one of her, you had my grandmother, and you had Muzz, the woman who Muzz refused to call white men and women sir or ma'am, and forbade her children to do that. And then who did the children grow up into? The 3 Freedom Riders, right? Like, it's a 1 + 1 = 2 in this family. It's very, very clear. But when you look at the origins of who we descend from, and what happened, and the fact that King Atlas survived that dispute in that store and did not get fined, did not get killed, and then his son goes on and becomes a landowner and sits on the board of a financial institution in rural Louisiana with an 8th or 9th grade education, and then sends his children to college. And then the next generation is where you have the Freedom Riders. And then the next one is us. Like, I can't imagine, like, it's hard for me to imagine what it's like not knowing that, but I get to see it every time I uncover a new family member and they don't know.
Right. And then you get to do it for other people's families to get them to see where they come from and how we survived. And I think those stories of survival is what I'm trying to get at with who we really are, right? Like, there are a lot of situations, and I hear this a lot. I get this pushback a lot in some of my trainings and stuff, where people are like, you can't really, especially as a Black person, especially as a woman, especially as a Black woman, you can't be fully yourself at work. Yes, you can. You don't have to tell everybody all your business. You can use your discernment to understand with whom to share what, but you can always show up as you. Right. And I think when you know from whence you come and how you survived and got here, it becomes much easier to stand, like as the children say, to stand on business.
To stand on business. And not only stand on business, but to recognize that, yes, we survived, but we also thrived in survival, right? Yeah. That whole survival, it was where some of our best cultural aspects of our community came from. Our language, the way that we operate, the way that we just kind of assemble in a particular way. We thrived in the survival. And when folks, say that I can't be myself there, you're not thriving in your survival. You're operating from a place where everything's a deficit. There's nothing that I can add to this. Our very existence is to thrive in survival. That's the reason why we are impeccable and incredible in diversity, equity, inclusion, is because we've learned to be comfortable in the uncomfortable. Our very existence is being that. And so naturally, because our family operates that way, right? It's gonna be a gut punch, but it's gonna come with a glass of tea, or a cup of tea afterwards. It's gonna come with a stroke on the back, but you're gonna hear it straight. And that's why I think so many of us are allies and advocates in so many spaces, from what I do in genealogy, for what you do with people just showing up as themselves, whether it's public speaking or whether it's them just in their jobs and how they operate, or my sister in the arts and dance, or, gosh, I can keep going on and on for all the different vocations and jobs that people have. That's the power of us knowing our identity, is that's how we thrive in the survival. But the question is, how does everyone else individually thrive in the survival? And once we reach the critical mass of learning how to thrive there, that's how everyone can operate entirely being fearlessly authentic, in my opinion.
Girl, you just preached the word. You might be one of Joseph's descendants with that kind of preaching. Come on now. Come on
Listen,
now.
it's
If,
decision time. Okay.
that's from the pulpit of progressive, baby.
Listen,
Come on.
the landscape is changing so much. Every day we're watching it. And younger generations are pulling us in a very distinct way that they always have. It's just different. You just see it more because we've got devices in front of our faces. People are not relying on the news or a particular agency to get the word out about certain things. You don't have to do that anymore.
Nope.
And that's scary for a lot of people because now you're recognizing that you're old. Because see, before you could get it because you were young and you understood it, and now you done got tired. And now you don't understand why they doing all this and saying all this and why we got. No, there's a constant pulling in it. The unction always begins with young people. But the further we go along and we continue to dismiss them, we're going to miss the whole point. We need to engage them early. We need to incorporate them early and recognize their voices. And if I can say this, that's why a lot of institutions in terms of the Black community are dying off, is because we don't see the value of truly engaging young people. And I'm not talking about putting them to work and making them volunteer things. No, respecting their brain trust and what they offer to us, as opposed to have them come over there and work that Facebook for me. Have them stop me at Threads or Instagram. No, ask them what their perspective is on how we can change and shape things. That's one of the, if I have a pet peeve, it's that we don't engage. We don't work multi-generational. Yeah. And we haven't learned how to do it well.
It is challenging. I will say that. Like and I think that, to your point, when you get tired, it is very difficult because these children, they want you to hand them a lot of things as far as the stories go, right? And I'm okay with that. The funny thing is, to me, because I just had this exchange with a young lady on Twitter, and I said to her, I said, baby, I'm tired. She said, well, you need to speak up. Boo, I've been speaking up. You actually don't know who you're talking to, but it's okay. And that's okay.
And
I'm
listen,
keep talking. I said, but understand, I'm tired.
Listen, the media training in me keeps me from saying things to people that be coming up and showing up into your space like you just arrived. No.
It's cute. And you know what? Here's the other thing. I don't expect her to know who I am. I don't speak to her. Right?
Well, and that's what I was about to say. That's
yep.
the double-edged sword, is recognizing I'm not the new kid on the block, but also not expecting them to recognize that you are on pedestal with plaque.
Yeah, nah. I will never be on pedestal with plaque, even if I have the pedestal with the plaque. I know, never that. Since I could talk to you for 150 years, I got 2 questions, and there will be another part of this. So nobody worry about anything being left out, but there are always 2 questions I'd like to end with.
Yeah.
The first one is a 2-parter. What is your proudest achievement so far, and what do you still dream of doing? I actually know some of the answers to this, but I'm interested to hear what you will say.
Oh boy, my proudest achievement so far, I think, gosh, I have to choose one?
Mm-hmm. Oh, go ahead, do what you want.
I'm going to say 2.
Okay.
And I'm going to choose for both sides of my family, so I'm equal. So my mom won't get mad at me for only choosing one. Definitely finding the history of the atlases before slavery ended. That took me 20 years. I never thought I would find that. And even after your uncle sewing in and all of that, to this day, I'm still cannot believe that I found that. I would say definitely that. I would say becoming the first person in my family in a generation to get my citizenship in the Cherokee Nation, and then helping 20 other family members get enrolled. That is probably up there as well. And then the work that I'm doing right now with descendant communities, I think is probably going to be one of the biggest parts of my legacy, is, really helping to guide and shape the work that's being done, addressing people who figure out that they're descendants of an event, a place, a connection, whether it's Justice for Greenwood and the descendants of people who survived Greenwood, or who were from Greenwood in the Tulsa Race Massacre, to Trash 250 and their connections to Amherst College, or being on the board of the descendants of enslaved laborers at the University of Virginia. Again, those are all descendant movements where people are finding their connections to those things. And I think that's the next frontier. So I will say those top three are my greatest achievements thus far.
And what do you still dream of doing?
Movies. Writing.
Thank you. Okay. I'm glad you claimed it, because that script is waiting to be done.
Right. I finished.
I was like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but can we get the movie done?
I know. So I wrote my first feature-length script, something I never thought I would do. That I didn't think I was
so good, y'all. Okay, sorry.
She read it, and I tell you, it was something I didn't think I could do. I just did not. Again, I mean, I didn't know that I would be doing this, So I'm on my runway, right? I'm taxiing.
Ma'am, you're flying. You just haven't gotten to 30,000 feet yet.
Right. I just have, again, so I'm taxing. So I'm learning, I'm writing, I'm exploring. I have a bunch of different concepts now that I've, got the first one done. Now I'm like, okay, let's go. Like now I know what I'm doing. So yeah, I would say probably writing. That's it. Because I think for me, naturally, I'm a writer, but having the experience of being a genealogist and knowing historical aspects, it feeds into the background, into the story in ways that I don't think that people quite realize. And it's I guess you would say it's like my superhuman skill that I'm able to tap into in that way.
Do you know I almost added it to your bio when I introduced you, but I was like, she didn't put it on her bio, and I did, and I'd already added, and I had already added a couple of things already. I was like, I should have put writer down there, but
I know, but listen, I just fastened my seatbelt.
Okay,
the beach just went on. Okay. So we are on the taxiway, and yeah, thank you for reading my first script, and I loved the play-by-play of every time something happened. I was like, yes, that hit. Like that's exactly what
I was literally reading it, y'all, and like this texting. You know how some people live tweet like the award shows? I live tweet when I'm reading. I text you everything. So, all right. So here's my final question.
Yes, ma'am.
When do you feel that you are at your best, truest, most authentic version of Nicka Sewell-Smith?
When I talk to everyday people, that's when I feel like I'm at my most truest, authentic self. It is not when I'm on a set and we have all this stuff. No. And even then, even if I'm working with somebody that people know or influenced by, it's when I get to talk to them as just me and whoever they are. That's when I'm at my most true self. And that's when that's something that I never hope to lose. I don't ever want to lose the ability to communicate to a person, just me and them, a human to another human, regardless of all the accolades and all the things that we've done. To me, that's where I get to show up as my truest self and to sow into the lives of other people from the vantage point of giving them permission to seek out answers regarding their family history. And that could be on a plane, that could be at a restaurant, that could be on a podcast, that could be in a session I'm leading, it could be on set someplace, because at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, all we have left are what we left here in this world for other people to benefit from and to go with. And that's where I'm truly authentically me.
So y'all met some of my family. Yay. I love doing this episode with my cousin Nicka. So many things to learn from this. I think from her story, what I love that she shared is how everything you do prepares you for what you are really put here on this earth to do. That metaphor of being on a runway and all the orchestration happening behind the scenes that you can't see, and how all those pieces eventually fall into place. Love that. also love the idea, because especially in these days and times when we often, even if you don't do it professionally, care about likes or care about how people are responding to what you do. But the fact that she took the perspective of not caring about how many subscribers she had or how many people she was doing for, but putting out work that was her best and providing experience for the people who were there, and how that has grown her audience and the people she's able to impact in a really beautiful, organic way. And then the importance of our history. And I think during Black History Month, but at any point in time, how our family history can empower us in a way that is freeing, that gives us an avenue to do what we're meant to do here. How there is generational trauma, sure, but there's also generational inheritance. And it's not just about monetary wealth, but about the wealth of knowledge, and how even when you discover things about your family later in life, how just getting that information can help you flourish and find your path and reestablish your identity in a way that kind of deep down in your heart where and who you truly come from. There was one interesting lesson that I don't think we've ever talked about before, that we kind of underestimate when it comes to generational wealth, that idea that how soon your family acquired land after slavery ended dictates where your family members are today, and how she saw that through our own family and sees that through so many other different families, but still how we overcome regardless of those circumstances. And when it comes to fearless authenticity, this idea of thriving in survival, becoming comfortable with the discomfort that being fearless, being authentic can often cause, not only for others, but also inside yourself. I kind of feel like fearless authenticity is my birthright, after talking to my cousin. And I appreciate that, Nicka, so much. Thank you for being my family. Thank you for showing us and the world even more of who we are and what we can be. If you are interested in connecting with Nicka, please check out all her channels for her different webinars and information, and join her Patreon community if you want some help in discovering the ancestry of your own family and discovering those stories. It's so, so important for us all to do that, if for nothing else, but for where we're going and how we're feeling about ourselves. Thanks again, Nicka. Now, I want to thank you, my Fearless Authenticity listeners, for your attention, your support. I wouldn't do this without you. I also could not do it without my amazing production team. So thank you to Vicky, Wayne, Jess, Lisa E., everybody on the team for your hard work each and every week. I hope that you will rate, review, download, subscribe, and share this episode every single place you get your podcast, including on YouTube, because that really helps to expand our reach and get more people interested in fearless authenticity. I would also be honored if you join my community, sign up for my newsletter at fearlessauthenticity.com. Follow me on social media at JM is where you find me on Twitter and Instagram. I'm sorry, X, whatever, you know what I mean. And at Ms. Jeanne Sparrow on Facebook and on TikTok, as well as on YouTube, where you will find the video version of this podcast. This has been Fearless Authenticity with me, Jeanne Sparrow, and I will see you again soon. Thank you. Mwah.